Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Unpicking Dissonance, a podcast brought to you by the music collective known as Fold, based in Leeds, United Kingdom. My name's Seth Moshowitz. I am the founder of Fold, and I will be hosting this podcast alongside, hopefully, many of my associates and our various collaborators that we've had over the years. As this is the introductory podcast, I feel I should probably introduce who we are and what we do. So we describe ourselves, and I'm reading this from an article in Far Out magazine that was recently published because we've had to rewrite this bio so many times over the years. We are a Leeds-based experimental music collective and community group. Since 2010, we've amplified humanitarian perspectives, challenged toxic narratives and abusive power structures, worked towards social uplift, and built community. We incorporate all kinds of human vocal expression into our music, including poetry, spoken word, singing, rapping, and public speaking. This involves numerous collaborations. We've worked with the poet and presenter Mr. G, London protest rapper Potent Whisper, and Northern jazz maestro Emma Johnson. We also use recordings of various luminaries, both living and deceased, from Lorraine Hansberry to E.F. Schumacher. These are often voices that have been written out of the public discourse. So the main reason for making this podcast is that we've had to take a step back from the full range of musical activities that we used to do, mainly that we've had to stop playing live shows, and we're making records a lot more slowly. And this is partly because, on the one hand, the cost of living crisis has affected everyone in the music industry, especially smaller independent acts. It's really hard to make a living as a musician in the UK at the moment. The venues can't take chances on weird-sounding, more experimental music. They have to rely on acts that are going to sell tickets. But also a lot of the members of Fold, including myself, are experiencing sort of neurodivergent burnout. Things are getting more difficult as we get older. I'm the oldest in the group, so it really affects me more directly, and especially as I have two neurodivergent children who both have their own unique needs, and balancing all of these things is quite difficult. I am myself pursuing a diagnosis of autism, and I know there seems to be an explosion of this happening right now. We're coming to terms with the language, and understanding is increasing, but in that process, a lot of people are discovering that, in fact, they are neurodivergent, for lack of a better term. And there are many different levels to autism. And, in the past, older generations, my parents' generation wouldn't think of someone like me as being autistic. They would assume it would have to present as more extreme. But, it turns out it's quite a range. And the problem is that a lot of people fall between the cracks because it's not so obvious. And I've realized I'm definitely one of those people. And it was easier to cope with these things when I was younger because of just having youthful energy. And being able to mask takes a lot of energy. So as I've gotten older, the reduction in energy just makes it harder to cope with everyday life. So there's that. Then on the other hand, we had a lot of channels on social media. We used to have, a pretty big reach across X and Facebook and Instagram and others. And since the genocide in Gaza, we've been very active in speaking out against both the military-industrial complex and Western complicity in this genocide. And we've put out numerous releases that deal with, forever wars, and really tried to highlight these issues through our music and on social media, of course. And we've noticed that since we started doing that, our reach has been throttled on almost all of these platforms down to virtually zero, which we take as a sign that we were doing the right things, that we were provoking the right people, and that we were, poking power. But unfortunately, further hinders our ability to make a living or to be able to keep funding the project. So all of these factors mean that we've had to reduce our activities. So we're not giving up entirely, but we've had to slow down. So something that we immediately miss is the connection with the wider world. The social media, although we're very conscious of getting too hooked on the validation, it's about having that connection and that feedback and feeling useful, I guess, to society. If you have something to say and you have reasonable wealth of experience to share and to reflect on what's happening in the world and be part of that conversation is really important. And we've all come to rely on social media for many things, and in our case for that specifically. But then also, Not playing live means that we miss out on all those conversations that you have before and after gigs. You're just out there less connecting with the community and your audience, people who are drawn to your work and, probably have like-minded views. So we thought that maybe a podcast would be a way of reconnecting with our audience and connecting with new people, creating a new audience. So what is this podcast actually meant to deal with? We called it Unpicking Dissonance because a lot of what we see around us is this experience of cognitive dissonance that everyone is having, looking at what's actually happening in the world versus what's being presented in mainstream media, what is normalized in our culture, the narratives, the stories that don't make any sense when weighed against the actual realities that we're living in. It is that cognitive dissonance that is beginning to wake up generations of people to how the world really works. And we see ourselves as a small part of an effort to map the true nature of our world beneath the facade of mainstream narratives and myths. So rather than doing that strictly through music, we thought it might be best to just do that more directly through a podcast. So that's what this really is about. In the coming episodes, we'll be discussing many things, reflecting on what's happening in the world right now. Obviously, the world is at somewhat of a turning point, potentially, and there are many, many layers to this that we're going to try and address and uncover, and hopefully have a wider conversation with whoever's listening so that we can continue to collectively map how things really work and figure out what the hell is going on and why. We always intended for Fold to be more of a platform, or that's why we describe it as a collective. The idea would be for lots of people to contribute to creating a platform that can amplify humanitarian perspectives and marginalized perspectives and do lots of things, build community. So we're not only making music, making records, etc. We're also running several music production workshops here in Leeds for young people facing barriers. That's a big part of our work. So the landscape is shifting for us, and this is part of that. So we're also looking to establish ourselves as what's called an unassociated organization, which is a kind of a community group so you have a constitution, you have members. It's not a company, it's not a charity, it's not that official, but it's official enough that you can use that as a springboard to apply for grants and funds and whatnot. So this is all part of that direction that we're shifting in, to be more than just a group or a music collective, more than just a band, because I think we all have to start thinking about what we can do, where to put our energies as things change for us, as we get older and respond to the cost of living crisis, respond to all these things that are happening around us, because it's imperative that we can think and act quickly and differently and be responsive rather than just burying our heads in the sand in despair, which, I wouldn't blame anyone for doing, because things really are bleak out there at the moment. And it's important for us all to look for joy and lean into joy wherever we can and work together and see ourselves as part of a collective, part of a community, rather than atomized individuals accumulating wealth for ourselves, because that is arguably the real source of the problem. That's the essence of neoliberalism and hyper-capitalism that's got us into this mess. And we will be talking about that more in upcoming episodes. So we hope you stay tuned. Give us a follow if you can, or a like, or whatever it is. And we hope to catch you in the next one. Peace.